The complex and often turbulent story of America and Iran wasn't always defined by the hostility that characterizes it today. There was a time when relations were markedly different. In the early 20th century, a different dynamic was at play. Iranians, seeking a partner without colonial baggage, saw America as a fair and genuinely helpful nation. They perceived the United States as a beacon of progress and impartiality. This was in stark contrast to Britain or Russia, powerful empires who consistently meddled in Iranian affairs for their own strategic and economic gain. Their interventions were often viewed with suspicion and resentment. Americans, through philanthropic efforts, built schools and hospitals, contributing to Iran's modernization. And for a time, a genuine sense of hope flourished, a belief in a shared future of progress and mutual respect. After World War II, the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. Iran's strategic location bordering the Soviet Union and its vast oil reserves made it a vital pawn in the emerging Cold War. The U.S., prioritizing its strategic interests, threw its weight behind the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. American policymakers saw him as a modernizer, a force for progress and, crucially, a reliable bulwark against the spread of Soviet influence in the region. In 1953, a watershed moment occurred. The CIA and British MI6 orchestrated a coup, a covert operation with far-reaching consequences. This coup removed Prime Minister Mossadegh from power after he attempted to nationalize Iran's oil, a move that threatened Western interests. With American backing, the Shah's power grew exponentially, consolidating his authority. But as his power expanded, so too did resentment among the Iranian populace. Many Iranians began to view America not as a benevolent partner, but as the destroyer of their nascent democracy, the force propping up an increasingly autocratic ruler. For the next 25 years, the Shah ruled with unwavering U.S. support, a period marked by both modernization and repression. But his regime's increasing brutality, coupled with widespread inequality and corruption, fueled deep anger and discontent among the Iranian people. Beneath Iran's seemingly modern and prosperous surface, a storm of revolution was brewing, gathering strength with each passing year. It was a storm aimed squarely at both the Shah and his powerful American ally, who were increasingly seen as one and the same. By the late 1970s, Iran's anger erupted. Diverse groups, religious leaders, students, the poor, united under Ayatollah Khomeini, who denounced the Shah's corruption and U.S. influence. Khomeini's calls for independence and Islamic values inspired millions. Massive protests overwhelmed the Shah's regime, the army stood aside. In January 1979, the Shah fled. Khomeini returned to a hero's welcome, and the Islamic Revolution began. The new government saw America as the enemy, remembering the 1953 coup and years of U.S. support for the Shah. The revolution was about reclaiming dignity and independence. The old partnership was gone, replaced by deep, lasting hostility. The year was 1979, a year of seismic shifts on the global stage. Tensions, already simmering beneath the surface, exploded in November. The spark that ignited the powder keg was the decision by the U.S. to admit the exiled Shah of Iran for medical treatment. This act was perceived by many Iranians as a direct affront. Fearing another coup reminiscent of the 1953 CIA-backed operation, Iranian students, fueled by revolutionary fervor, stormed the U.S. embassy in Tehran. In a brazen act of defiance, they seized the compound and took over 50 Americans hostage, plunging U.S.-Iran relations into a deep freeze. Their demands were clear and non-negotiable: return the Shah to Iran for trial, to face justice as they saw it. They also demanded a formal apology for past U.S. actions in Iran, viewing it as interference in their internal affairs. Ayatollah Khomeini's newly established government openly backed the students' actions, further escalating the crisis. The crisis dragged on for an agonizing 444 days, a period of intense diplomatic maneuvering and public anxiety. It dominated American news cycles and political discourse, becoming a constant source of national frustration. The hostage situation was widely perceived as deeply humiliating for the U.S., exposing its vulnerability on the world stage. A daring but ultimately failed rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw, only deepened the trauma and sense of helplessness. The hostages were finally released on January 20, 1981, coinciding with Ronald Reagan's inauguration. A symbolic end to a painful chapter, but the damage to the relationship between the two countries was profound and lasting. For many Americans, Iran became synonymous with hostility and the embodiment of an enemy. Conversely, for many Iranians, the hostage crisis represented a victory over the Great Satan, a symbol of American imperialism. The crisis left behind a legacy of deep-seated bitterness and profound mistrust that continues to shape U.S.-Iran relations to this day. The 1979 hostage crisis was a watershed moment, poisoning relations between the United States and Iran for decades to come. It left a legacy of deep mistrust. In the wake of the crisis, U.S.-Iran relations froze completely. Diplomatic ties were severed, and the American embassy in Tehran was left abandoned, a stark symbol of the broken connection. During the turbulent 1980s, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East shifted dramatically, further complicating the already strained relationship. Amidst this chaos, America quietly supported Iraq, providing assistance to Saddam Hussein's regime. This support was aimed at bolstering Iraq in its bloody and protracted war against Iran, a conflict that devastated both nations. This perceived alignment with their enemy only deepened Iranian suspicions about American intentions and long-term goals in the region. Simultaneously, the U.S. accused Iran of actively backing terrorist groups throughout the Middle East, alleging their involvement in destabilizing activities, and of covertly seeking to develop nuclear weapons, a claim that Iran has consistently denied, but one that has fueled international concern. The United States responded to these accusations by imposing harsh economic sanctions, crippling Iran's economy, and further isolating the nation. Iran, in turn, saw this as further proof of American hostility, viewing the sanctions as an attempt to undermine their sovereignty and suppress their ambitions. Despite the deep-seated animosity, there were occasional attempts at dialogue, but these efforts ultimately failed. These attempts were consistently blocked by hardliners on both sides, individuals who were unwilling to compromise or find common ground. As the world moved into the 21st century, the U.S. invasions of Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003 left Iran feeling increasingly surrounded by American forces and influence, heightening their sense of vulnerability. Consequently, the two countries clashed repeatedly across the Middle East, often through proxy conflicts and indirect confrontations. Each nation viewed the other's actions and strategic moves as direct threats to their own security and regional interests. These decades of accumulated anger, suspicion, and mutual distrust became deeply ingrained and central to both nations' identities, shaping their foreign policies and domestic narratives. This made building trust and fostering meaningful dialogue nearly impossible, perpetuating a cycle of animosity and conflict. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal offered hope, limiting Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. But in 2018 the U.S. withdrew, reimposing tougher sanctions. Iran felt betrayed and restarted its nuclear activities. Today, tensions remain high, with both sides clashing over regional influence, missiles, and human rights. The ghosts of the 1953 coup, the revolution, and the hostage crisis still haunt relations. Understanding this history is crucial. It's not a simple story of good versus evil, but of a friendship turned bitter rivalry. The past shapes today's challenges, and any hope for peace.